Today's story was written by Reddit user OG-Gruntcom. A green-scaled captain stood in front of a large data screen in a bustling bridge, multiple officers passing behind him to report to their stations, with some of them still slightly out of uniform as if recently woken up. A red light consumed the bridge periodically, though was washed out enough with regular lighting that it gave everything a small red tint. The captain stood, looked into the eyes of his old peer, which stood in a seemingly similar bridge. "Reports indicate it was your fleet that firebombed Epsilon, Captain T-Lock. Tell me they were wrong, and I can just pass by. Your inaction will be noted," the human commander said, his face focused and stern. There was a hint of desperation in what he said, but it seemed smothered by barely contained rage. "It was my fleet, Commander Allen," the captain responded, a sigh escaping his lips afterwards. He felt as though he had just signed his fate with those exact words. "We have multiple missile signatures inbound, sir," one of the captain's staff members yelled out. "Fire the PDCs! Get the wings in the void, now!" One of the officers yelled out towards the staff members. "Last cycle, we went there with our families, remember, Captain? For your hat, for my hatchling day, Commander, I remember," the captain said solemnly. They're splitting apart. The PDCs can't track that many targets. They are getting over..." The ship vibrates as hundreds of guided cluster munitions exploded against the shielding of the large flagship. The flagship's PDCs fire chaotically into the air, barely hitting few as more continued to bombard the ship and its escorts. "It was beautiful, so green, rare to see nowadays, and you burned it? All of it?" the commander said, gritting his teeth as he spoke to his old close friend. "Shields at 40%, 33%, 15%. Brace for impact," one of the staff said, holding onto his console as the ship violently began to rock back from the sheer amount of explosions erupting against its sides. "Yes, I had Fuck your orders, T-Lock. You could have called it off. You could have refused and at least given them the opportunity to relieve you of command. Then maybe you'd have some bit of fucking honour," the commander said coldly, his rage piercing through his once maintained formal demeanour. "Plasma cannons 2, 3, and 4 are down. We have secondary explosions erupting on Weapons Bay 1 and 2, one of the officers said, his screens all blaring red as he desperately attempted to disable them. "Seal the bulkheads. I don't care about the survivors. Save the ship," the first officer commanded. "Railgun discharge detected. Brace, brace, brace!" The railgun shot tore through the flagship's midsection. The hypervelocity round punched through armour plating like tissue paper, leaving a perfect circular hole behind. The projectile's kinetic energy unleashed a shockwave that rippled through the vessel's hull and structure, buckling bulkheads and ramming flesh through metal. Atmosphere vented violently from the new wound, creating a momentary fog inside the hallways as moisture instantly crystallized in the vacuum rush. Crew members who hadn't secured themselves were swept toward the decompression zone, their bodies thrown helplessly through corridors, before disappearing into open space. Captain T-Lock gripped a support beam, his eyes darting side to side as system after system flashed critical on the remaining displays. The flagship leaned heavily to starboard, its stabilizers destroyed. Through the viewport, he watched as secondary explosions chained across his vessel's hull. Bright orange balls of contained flames, destruction and death glowing against the darkness of the void outside. "Reactor containment failing," a surviving officer reported, voice barely audible over the sounds of chaos within the bridge. "Core breach imminent." "Give the hails for surrender, disengage the weapons and tell the fleet to stand down," the captain said, after struggling to stand back up from the ground. "No, Captain," the commander responded. The captain looked back up towards the commander, confused. He has never known for the Terrans to engage a surrendered foe before. The distress signals from Epsilon were clear, that they powered down their defensive emplacements, that they hangared their patrol craft. But you kept firing, right, Captain? The commander said. The captain's scales flashed blue in terrified confirmation of his guilt. Disregard. Fire again, the commander said. Another railgun discharge detected. We can't take another hit. The ship's bridge was then filled with a rushing atmosphere and screams as another impact cut through it. The projectiles hitting one of the escort destroyers beside the flagship and causing it to explode from a direct reactor impact. Again. A 5-metre-sized hole was instantaneously punched through the rear portion of the flagship, as if cut out by a hole puncher used on a single sheet. Bodies floated out into the open wound before the explosions erupted from within. Again. The engine's portion is completely sheared off from both railgun and secondary explosions. Fire filled the unprotected hallways before the void took it all. The commander watched as the captain struggled to hold onto the railing of his post. Bodies of his staff sucked out into the void periodically behind him as he attempted to pull himself forward. "Happy hatchling day," he said as he watched the captain lose his grip, his body smashing against the corner of a damaged panel and ripped back out into open space before the comms link is cut from reactor meltdown. Soon, the rest of the fleet that was responsible for Epsilon's colony firebombing was destroyed. Any escape pods that were able to escape their ship's demise were left to float in space. Helmsman, decloak, rearm, and prepare to jump to the Jolton system. Target, Jolton Prime, the commander said, turning from the data screen to see the rest of his crew watching him, all prideful and in a salute. Ready the orbital drop troopers. The commander brings his hand up to salute, a bright light from a reactor exploding with several others lighting up behind him. We will make them suffer. For Epsilon. For President Reeves. For mankind. He lowers his salute. They follow in unison and begin their preparations.